call a sack lunch. Nom, 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 nom.
Good morning, Sac City. Welcome into another edition of the Sac City Podcast. I am your host, the one and only Vinny Milani, joined as always by my best friend in the whole entire world. He is Aaron the Mukesiah Mukes. It is a beautiful November 28th morning here in the city. Episode 124 is about to kick off, and we've got things that are a little bit different. Things might be a little bit different around here in the city moving forward. We've got a different kind of show hitting you from here on out for the remainder of the season. We are making the switch. Aaron. We're not making a big announcement about this. We're not doing a brand change. We're not doing the changeover. We're still the Sac City, but it's time for the Sac City to start putting its priorities where we belong. We start putting our focus where it belongs, and that's in the fantasy football world. So from here on out, it's time for a new change, a new era in the Sac City world, where we're talking fantasy football, and we're really focusing on what wins championships. We're focusing on the people, okay? We're focusing on the people with this.
We are a show of the people. That is a true story. Yeah. No real explanation needed. We're gonna do what we do. We're the Sac City. It's our show. We can do what the hell we want. If you don't like it, bye. You know how we feel about that. We don't care. We're gonna do what we want to do. We're gonna do what we feel is best. And fantasy football is king. And specifically, we're fantasy football kings. So that's what we're gonna deliver. We're gonna give everybody an opportunity to win some money, to win some championships, and we all like a winner. So that's what we're gonna focus on. We're gonna focus on winning, and specifically because I like to be right. That's really what this is more about. And I just like to be right, and I like to win fantasy leagues, and I like to ask people for apologies, as I'm going to do today.
That's the thing. That
it is. I want to start with that. I want everybody out there. I want Vinny. I want Bailey. I want every fantasy football player in the world. Every fantasy football player in the world, AJ, because we had debates on this. I want everybody to apologize to me and just say, Aaron, I'm sorry. You were right. He's a dog. Everybody in the fantasy football community faded Mr. Josh Jacobs. And today, I celebrate him. Today, I stand at the top of the mountain and say, I told everybody not to fade this man. And, some people listened, Vinny. Vinny, you listened. I sold you on him. That's
why I will not apologize for anything.
You should, but you were sold after I talked. And I was like, you know what? That's the sign of a good man, to recognize when he hears something right and he follows it. And Josh Jacobs, like I said, this show is dedicated to you because, boy, who let the dog out? Because he was let out yesterday.
Yeah, he was indeed let out yesterday. He was the highest scoring fantasy player yesterday. Broke records for the Raiders in terms of all-purpose yards. Literally, when you talk about carrying someone to a victory, he carried the Las Vegas Raiders to a victory, and quite possibly carried your fantasy team to a victory. Really, he didn't help that much on my fantasy team, because my fantasy team this week just dominated. I beat the shit. I beat the brakes off of Dylan this week in fantasy, probably making him have to change his name to. He's got to change his name after this week, because he's done. He's done.
You did beat him pretty bad.
Yeah, and I'm not done yet. I still have two players that go tonight. I still have Michael Pittman and Najee Harris. So it gets worse for Dylan. But enough about my own personal fantasy team. Let's shift our focus now to what happened in week 12. And Aaron, this is an all new version of, well, not really an all new version, but let's go inside the matchup. That's right. It's time for us to go inside the matchup and take a look back on some of the big standouts, not big standouts, I should say, the big time moments from week 12, Aaron. And I guess let's start off from that game that we were just talking about. Let's start off from the Raiders and the Seahawks. 74 total combined points in this game. Lots of fantasy value from both sides of the ball here. Josh Jacobs obviously having his day. Kenneth Walker had a good day as well. I shouldn't say he had a good day in terms, like, if you look at his stat line, 14 carries for 26 yards, that's not like a great day. But in terms of fantasy, 16.9 fantasy points that yesterday. You look at Davante Adams, he found the end zone. He had a good day. This is just a day that a game that had tons of fantasy impact here. What stood out to you the most about Raiders Seahawks?
Yeah, well, let's talk about it, because this is one of the games we looked at as being a great matchup for players on both sides of the football. It's an offensive juggernaut, I guess you can say, or lack thereof on the defensive side of the football. So we were excited about players like Josh Jacobs, like Kenneth Walker. Both quarterbacks were mentioned in our starts of the week. Obviously, the receivers, you have Davante Adams, you have Tyler Lockett, and you have DK Metcalf. And I think this is what fantasy players love. This is what we want to see. We want to look for games like this, and we want to take advantage of those. If you're in DFS or if you're in even season long, you want to make sure you got these guys in your lineup. Just starting at the quarterback position alone, both Geno Smith and Derek Carr put up good numbers. They put up the numbers that we expected. They were both in the top 10 in quarterback so far on the week. Derek Carr a little bit ahead of Geno Smith, but overall, you look at both running backs, again, putting up RB1, back in RB1 numbers. Josh Jacobs obviously exploding for the game that he had, but it's this total fantasy production out of one game. And this is where you can take advantage of situations like this when you have poor defensive performances, knowing the other team's going to have to keep up with them. I loved every minute of this game. When you talk about the lowest scoring player out of the, I guess you can say, the big names that we tend to want to look at, were like Davante Adams at 14. You know what I mean? Like 14 points, which is not great for Davante Adams. We understand that. We expect more from Davante Adams. But if you're looking at 6, 7, 8 players that are going to be highly rostered most of the time in people's starting lineups, and they're producing that level of production, that you're in for a good day. And specifically, one name that I wanted to mention that I've been trying to tell people to get on board with, as long as Darren Waller and as long as Hunter Renfrow are out, is Matt Collins. Matt Collins put up 16 points in this game, had 4 catches, 63 yards, and a touchdown. And that he's on the opposite side of Davante Adams. And we got to start realizing that when you're on the opposite side of a great receiver like that, who's going to draw that much attention, Matt Collins needs to be rostered in more leagues. He's only rostered in 31% of sleeper leagues right now, only started in 12%. And if you're playing in a 12-team deeper league, Matt Collins needs to be in your lineup, because he's there for double digits. He's had double digits in 4 of his last 6 games. Matt Collins was a factor yesterday. As a matter of fact, he was a factor for my specific fantasy team, helping me probably get the win this week against Sherm. So guys like that need to find a way into your lineups, at least be rostered. 31% is way too low for the number 2 receiver on a team that's not good defensively, that is going to have to throw the football. I think it's important that we understand to some of these guys need to be on rosters that aren't currently on there.
Yeah, Matt Collins, I actually had that exact same thought yesterday when I was watching. I'm like, man, Matt Collins is probably the biggest benefactor from the Darren Waller going down and Hunter Renfrow going down. And then you throw in the Foster Moreau thing, and him becoming a viable fantasy option at the tight end position, which is weak every week. Matt Collins, since week 8, by the way, is wide receiver 31. So he's creeping up right into that consideration for a flex play every week. I think that's where Matt Collins is. And Foster Moreau had another touchdown in this game. He's a player that every week we look at your tight end position, and when you rank the tight ends, he's creeping up more and more and more in your rankings, and he deserves to be. You think he deserves to be rostered as well? Like where do you find Matt Collins rest of season?
Matt Collins or Foster Moreau?
Not Matt Collins. Foster Moreau.
I like Foster Moreau. I do think there's some inconsistency, and he's going to be touchdown dependent because he's not a big stretch the field type guy. And I do think they like to use the running backs out of the backfield and the receivers more because he's not Darren Waller-esque. But he's going to be like most of the other tight ends, which is touchdown dependent and a dart throw. I think you can put him in the category that you put most tight ends in, which means any tight end through 4 through 12 throw a dart, and it could be a guy that could score you some points. So yeah, do I think he's a viable option? Sure. He's playing a ton of snaps. He's playing 95% of the snaps over the past since week 7, and he's seen at least 3 catches in 3 of those games. I think it's just a matter of, can he get in the end zone? And obviously touchdowns, you can't really predict them like that. He's only got 2 on the year, but I do think there's some viable fantasy relevance there. He's only scored under 5 points twice this season when he's played. So I think I know 5 points doesn't seem like a lot, but when you look at the tight end numbers, the average defense is only given up like 6 points to a tight end. So I think there's some viability there. I still think there's better options that are players that are a little bit more explosive with higher upside. But as long as Darren Waller's out and the Raiders' defense is as poor as it's been, then I think Foster Moreau is a viable dart throw option at the tight end position.
I'm gonna even one up you on this one. I think Foster Moreau next week, and I don't mean to like shift our attention next week, but Foster Moreau might be in that contention for start of the week next week. The Raiders play the Chargers, and the Chargers have allowed the 3rd most receiving yards per game to the tight end position. On top of that, like you were mentioning, how much Foster Moreau is playing. He's played 380 of the last 386 snaps over the last 6 weeks. He has been a consistent factor in this offense. And next week, matched up against the Chargers, poor defense against the tight end position, he should be borderline a top 5 tight end heading into next week against the Chargers, in my opinion. We'll see how your rankings shape up on Wednesday when you drop your fantasy rankings here. But let's stay on the ground. Let's go back to the ground game and shift gears to a different game that happened that capped our night last night in the Philadelphia Eagles defeating the Green Bay Packers in a very high-scoring affair. Lots of rushing in this game. Aaron Rodgers goes down with a rib injury or oblique injury in the 3rd quarter. We saw Jordan Love come in this game, but to me, this game, and I know you even noted it in our doc here, that we want to talk about the rushing attack from Green Bay or from Philadelphia last night, which it deserves to be talked about. But I also want to throw in there that this is the rushing from both teams in this game that really make headlines to me. Both Aaron Jones and finally A.J. Dillon are fantasy relevant in the same game. We've been hoping for this all year long, dating back to when we talked about this team. When we previewed it, we said that if this team wants to be successful, it's going to have to come through the running game. We saw it in this one. Aaron Jones, 12 carries. A.J. Dillon, 8 carries. Both these guys, 18 and 17 points respectively in fantasy this week. They were productive. That they scored a ton of points. I felt like they were more in this game with the Eagles than the score showed. And I think it was because of that running game. And I think that it should continue, especially if Aaron Rodgers misses time. I think you can start considering A.J. Dillon climbing right back up into that flex, that solid flex, maybe borderline RB2 spot. If Matt LaFleur says okay and realizes that, hey, maybe this is actually what we're supposed to be doing, giving our backs the ball.
I hate to do. I disagree. I disagree for a couple of reasons. I think this is the anomaly. I really do. I think this is the anomaly for the Green Bay Packers and not the normal. When you talk about the rushing attack, it wasn't a heavy volume, and that's what scared me. The volume wasn't heavy. It was the production. And we've seen what Jonathan Taylor did the week before to Philadelphia's defense. We saw the week before that what Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson were able to do in Washington against that Philadelphia defense. Since Jordan Davis has gone out, that Philadelphia's front has not been very good, and they looked the part yesterday again. They looked very soft. Aaron Jones to me is the guy. Like I do believe Aaron Jones. Obviously, I don't think we need to spend much time on Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones is an RB1. He has been since day one. He has his ups and downs, but I know Aaron Jones is the guy. A.J. Dillon to me is what I worry about. I don't know that A.J. Dillon's production continues. You're talking about a guy who really hasn't been that productive this year, and he's always been playing around 40% of the snaps. He was an uptick a little bit more yesterday because of they wanted to run the ball, but even the week before, he played 50% of the snaps, had 6 carries, which is only 2 less than what he had yesterday, and he ran for 13 yards, got 1 catch, and didn't score. A.J. Dillon is a very touchdown-dependent running back, and I don't know that there's defenses out there that are going to be as soft as Philadelphia's was last night. It's almost like Philadelphia was allowing them to run the football and saying, well, it's okay. Our offense is explosive enough. We're just going to come and hit you right back in the mouth. I don't know that's going to be the case. It was actually one of his fewer outputs of the year. He's had double-digit carries in multiple games this year and hasn't produced. I'm on the other side of that. I think A.J. Dillon is if you still have the opportunity to trade him and somebody was excited about that game yesterday, I'm trading him today for tomorrow, I guess, when you can actually make the deal, and saying, look, A.J. Dillon's back. Come and get something for him. Let me get something for him. I think you take advantage of it that way. I do not think A.J. Dillon's production continues. He is going to continue to be a touchdown-dependent RB3/flex, in my opinion. Aaron Jones, on the other hand, I think you're spot on. I think Aaron Jones is the heart of that offense. And now with the injury, the only plus to A.J. Dillon would be the injury to Aaron Rodgers. If he does miss time down the stretch because they're out of it, maybe Green Bay goes to a more run-heavy scheme than we've seen. But even then, like I said, man, A.J. Dillon's had an 18-carry game, a 17-carry game, multiple 12 and 11-carry games, and hasn't produced double digits in any of them. He has one double-digit game outside of last night, and that was week 1. And it was also the only other time he scored a touchdown. So it proves that he's a touchdown-dependent running back, and I don't love it.
Mm-hmm. The only thing that makes me want to agree with you is the fact that, especially with the A.J. Dillon part, is this Packers team, they still have their bye. And that's huge. I mean, going into your fantasy playoffs, they have that week 14 bye. I think that's a very big deal. And then outside of that, for your fantasy playoffs, they have the Rams, the Dolphins, and the Vikings to follow that. Not too bad of matchups, but I think that maybe you are on to something about getting rid of A.J. Dillon. But if you're battling for a playoff spot, I know that bye is there, but before the bye, they have Chicago. They have Chicago next week, and that could be a good matchup as well. But your trade deadline is probably already passed. Let's talk about what really matters in that game, though. Let's talk about the rushing attack from the Philadelphia Eagles. 363 total yards in that game, 3 total rushing touchdowns. Kenneth Gainwell got in on the action. Broke my heart, though, and lost me some money towards the end of the night. But Miles Sanders also had 2 touchdowns in that game as well. Aaron, let's just start right there. Let's just start with the basics here. What did you think of the rushing attack from the Philadelphia Eagles last night?
I thought it was great. It's what I expect from the Philadelphia Eagles, to be honest. I told you, this team starts with the running game. Everybody loves the A.J. Dillon and Devonta Smith and Dallas Goedert when he's healthy. It starts with the running game. Not only was it the running backs, which you mentioned, it was Jalen Hurts too, rushing for a career high. This is why he's a top 5 fantasy quarterback, is because it doesn't have to always do it through the air. But Miles Sanders, shout out to Miles Sanders. He's had a huge bounce back year. He's right now, he's 13th in PPR scoring, 10 in standard league, 2 touchdown game. Remember last year he didn't score a touchdown. He's got 8 touchdowns this year, a career high. And he's not even being used out of the backfield in the passing game. It is special to watch Miles Sanders. You're really starting to see what his potential could be. And this is what people were so excited about a couple of years ago when people were taking him in that 2nd and 3rd round, thinking he was going to have that breakout. Jalen Hurts has allowed him to have that breakout. The threat of Jalen Hurts on the outside has made Miles Sanders a much more viable fantasy option. And the fact that he doesn't have to get high volume all the time to be effective is even better, because then he can preserve his body and doesn't have to touch the ball 21 times like he did last night. But there are the times he can do that. So super excited for what we've seen from Miles Sanders, and Kenneth Gainwell jumping in there, scoring a touchdown. Boston Scott got a little bit of action. I know he wasn't fantasy relevant or anything like that, but they dominated. 363 yards on the ground. That is somebody just smash mouth football. That is, once again, showing me how soft Green Bay's defense is. And if I'm a fantasy owner, now I'm looking for the Green Bay schedule. I'm looking, where do I play Green Bay at? Because that's an opportunity to take advantage of that in the running game. They are so soft. And I'm like Charmin soft. They're soft. It's sad. And I feel bad for my guy, Quay Walker. Shout out UGA. He had the nice big fumble recovery, but they just do not tackle well. And something has to change there. But if you have any of these running backs that are going against Green Bay down the stretch, you got to feel pretty excited about that, with that opportunity to run against that defense, because Philadelphia dominated on the ground. Really in the trenches overall, they dominated.
Yeah, next week for Green Bay, next week it's David Montgomery, and then the bye, and then maybe a Kyron Williams game for the Los Angeles Rams in Week 15, and then why am I forgetting his name? The Dolphin Jeff Wilson Jr. In Week 16, and then Dalvin Cook in your championship week. So Dalvin Cook might be a league winner when it comes down to it for championships. Obviously, Dalvin Cook's already doing his damn thing anyway, so it's like league winner.
Yeah, I don't love those other guys. I thought maybe might be some better names in there.
Nope.
I'm never going to say it's a Kyron Williams game at this point. The Rams running game sucks. David Montgomery will have, he'll be David Montgomery, but it's still the Bears. They don't have an offensive line. Like Philadelphia, it was a perfect combination. Let's be honest. Philadelphia has the best offensive line in football right now, and it's a bad defense. So that was kind of a perfect combination, which lends to 363 yards rushing. But the fantasy output is really what we're concerned with, right? So when you get 31 points from Miles Sanders, you gotta love it.
Yeah, no, definitely. He's RB6 over the past 2 weeks. And Miles Sanders, did you already touch on this? Maybe I missed it now because I was looking at other things here. But did you already talk about rest of season value for Miles Sanders? Did you touch on that?
I haven't. That was going to be part of our conversation for our Sunday Standouts. To be honest, like I'm more and more excited about Miles Sanders each and every week. And I had an opportunity to trade for him, and I didn't. There's always that. Let's be honest. He's one of those players where you have that thing in the back of your head that says, I can't trust. Like I can't fully trust him because he's burned me so many times in the past. But when do we get over that? When do we say, you know what? Like you just have to buy what you're seeing. I think I'm almost to that point.
Yeah, I mean, well, you talk about it all the time. How like you're not like. Everything you do in the draft, everything you do in like the first few weeks of the season in preparation for everything, it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't, like that goes out the window. Like you stop having those expectations, you stop living off of what has happened in the past, and just start talking about what he's been able to do. Like I mentioned before, RB6 over the past 2 weeks, and you look ahead for him as well. He doesn't have his playoff schedule. Isn't that bad either. I'm trying to find it again. I had it, but I lost it.
It's Dallas or Chicago, Dallas, and New Orleans.
Okay, so maybe that is. What do you think about
that? I don't love that. I don't love that schedule. It's crazy because now that we're talking about Miles Sanders, I'm almost fading him after just giving him all this praise. You talk about running back 6 over the last 2 weeks. A lot of that obviously came last night. He had 5 points just the week before and another 5 points the week before that on 25 carries. I think the thing with Miles Sanders is I'm not saying he's touchdown dependent, but they don't care who's in the backfield. So in Philly, Miles Sanders could run 15 times, but Kenneth Gainwell could be at the goal line just because Miles Sanders is out of the game. Like they do not say they're not going to reward Miles Sanders just because he's having a good game. They don't care who they give the touchdowns to. They don't care. Like they are a very selfless team. So they'll give it to Boston Scott near the red zone. They'll give it to Gainwell. They'll give it to Miles Sanders. Jalen Hurts is going to run in some. I think it's very unpredictable as to when he's going to get his opportunities in the red zone. And ultimately, still about those touchdowns because he's not really getting anything in the passing game. This is why players like this have a capped upside. It's Dameon Pierce. It's AJ Dillon. It's those players have a ceiling because they're not involved in the passing game. It is not the same thing as having a Ken Walker or the same thing as having a Christian McCaffrey or an Austin Eckler who can rush for 40 yards and still put up RB1 numbers because they're getting 7 catches that game or whatever. Miles Sanders can be game scripted out. Those other guys can't. It's going to limit his upside. So you have to just set your expectations to that. You have to understand that he's probably going to be a mid-tier RB2, but you're going to have to deal with those dud games of 50 and 60 yards and no catches. You're going to have to be able to live with that. And if that happens in your fantasy playoffs, you could be finding yourself on the outside. Yeah.
The Bears matchup really to start your fantasy playoffs is your only juicy one. They rank 28th against the running back position. And then you say, that, like you said, the Cowboys and the Saints. The Cowboys rank 6th against the running back position, and the Saints rank 8th against the running back position. So tough matchups for Miles Sanders moving forward. If your trade deadline hasn't passed, give me some names. There's some, like me, I told you about this ridiculous league that I'm in, that my playoffs start in week 14 or week 13, and then the trade deadline is still a thing. It's not, but there's money involved, and but there are some leagues that maybe their trade deadline hasn't passed. What running backs would you be? And even not necessarily the trade targets, but maybe you have these lineup decisions later on in your season. Like, what running backs are you considering over Miles Sanders rest of season?
I mean, if you want to set a line, I definitely think guys like, obviously, Ken Walker. Let's just set the line there. Ken Walker is a guy that's come on. I'm taking Ken Walker over Miles Sanders, and it's really not particularly close. I'm trying to think of some other off the top names. I'm going to go down this list.
Let me help you. Let me help you out, because this is what I do. Not Gus Edwards. Miles Sanders or Cordero Patterson rest of season.
Ugh.
Yeah,
Miles Sanders.
Okay. Miles Sanders or Dameon Pierce rest of season.
Miles Sanders.
Miles Sanders or Tony Pollard rest of season.
Miles Sanders. That's close.
Miles Sanders or David Montgomery.
Miles Sanders. I'd have to check David Montgomery's schedule. He's a king of killing at the end of the season. Philadelphia, Buffalo, Detroit. Yeah, I would take Miles Sanders.
Okay. Well, okay. So
that's probably Miles Sanders, David Montgomery are probably right next to each other.
Okay. All right. Let me do one more. Let me find one good one that'll get you going here. Miles Sanders or Aaron Jones. Let's talk about in the same game.
Aaron Jones, not close.
Not even close. Wow.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, Miles Sanders, Najee Harris.
Najee Harris.
Okay. All right. I'll stop asking.
The volume for Najee Harris. He doesn't have anybody competing with him. Najee Harris would be, that's easy. Aaron Jones is not. Aaron Jones is a top 8 running back, so that's not even.
Okay. All right.
Not a thing for me.
All right. So if your trade deadlines have not passed yet for some reason, go out and sell you a Miles Sanders for some value.
I have leagues that the trade deadline has not passed yet. I got leagues that you can still trade in. And when you're talking about most dynasty leagues don't have trade deadlines until playoffs start. You just can't trade. If you're in dynasty leagues, you can still move guys, keeper leagues, things like that. So I'm okay with, making moves all the way up until you need to not make moves anymore.
I would expect to see in our sleeper league to get notifications of Bailey putting Miles Sanders on the trade block. If that hasn't happened already, it will happen.
He already had him. He already had him on the block, because that's who I was going to acquire. Like in that deal, I was close to doing it. It'd have been nice to have him this week, but ultimately you still have to deal with. Again, I always tell people, don't look at last week when you make a deal. Look at the rest of the season, how you project that out, which might still be good, but you're not getting those 31 points that Miles Sanders had. So
no, I agree. Let's talk about one more game. Let's talk about, you know what? Actually, I'm going to move something for you. And we're going to shift gears into our Sunday standouts. Let's talk about some big time players that stood out on Sunday. We talked Josh Jacobs. We've talked Miles Sanders. Let's talk about some other guys here that stood out from Sunday's action. Who stood out to you the most, that really off the top of your head, other than those two guys that we just talked about, that you want to discuss?
Yeah, I've kind of pounded my chest on this one for a couple of weeks this season as well. If you haven't been paying attention, it's Zay Jones. Your Jacksonville Jaguars, Zay Jones. He had a day. And this is not shocking to me. It may be shocking to some people, but this is not shocking to me. I've been saying all year I liked what he was able to do this season. 27 fantasy points, but it was more than the 27 fantasy points. It was the contested catches. It was the big time catches in big moments. 10 targets, 8 catches, 68 yards. 14 targets, 11 catches, 145 yards off of that 10 target, 8 catch, 68 yard game before the bye. He had 27.5 fantasy points. He's wide receiver 34 on the year, but this is after getting off to a slow start, missing a game, had a couple of duds there in between. But for the most part, he's been a pretty viable flex option throughout the course of the season. And once again, he showed up, and you're starting to see the improvement of Trevor Lawrence, and it's impacting what Zay Jones is able to do. He's clearly the number 2 receiver there. Him and Christian Kirk have turned out to be pretty decent tandem, and we weren't really sure what that was going to look like at the beginning of the season. People said they overpaid for some of these guys, but they're actually being productive, and they're impacting games and impacting the Jaguars' offense. So Zay Jones, you have to be excited about what his potential is. This is a guy that's super athletic, has skills that people don't really know about. He was supposed to be really good in Buffalo, and he had the mental breakdown and that whole situation, goes to the Raiders, kind of a journeyman, and then he comes to Jacksonville, and maybe now he's found a home that's allowing him to excel and reach his max potential. I can't speak more highly about Zay Jones than I will today. I think that he has a huge impact down the stretch for this team. And if you look at some of their schedule, they have some tough matchups. This is not easy. They get Detroit and they get Tennessee. I think those are okay. But then in the playoffs, you get, the Jets, tough matchup. Houston's not a great matchup either. But I think he has value. I think that I think this is a guy that if you can trade for, you go out and you pay a cheap price for. Probably not today after that game because they're probably going to upsell you. But you don't have to give up a lot because he doesn't have the big name. But he is going to make fantasy rosters relevant. He's going to make an impact down the stretch because I think they have to throw the football, especially now with the injury to ETN. And I think he's that good. I really do. 37% rostered, not rostered in enough leagues. I don't know how many times I can say it. Each week I keep telling people, go get Zay Jones, go get Zay Jones. He's going to have an impact. And again, all those people missed out yesterday on a big performance.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the guy. You brought up one thing that really stood out to me is it's not just that he's producing, but it's when he's producing in the big moments of the games for the Jacksonville Jaguars, and that stands out. To a coach like Doug Peterson. You look at the snap counts, both him and Christian Kirk saw the same amount of snaps. Christian Kirk ran one more route than him, but the targets, that's the biggest difference between him and Christian Kirk. 14 targets in this game against the Ravens, which they won. They saw a lot of success, big time plays from Zay Jones, 14 targets for him, as opposed to Christian Kirk's 8 targets here. I think the Zay Jones value and the stock for Zay Jones is rising here. I know, Aaron, we're going to talk about the injuries. I know I skipped over that because it was just a very easy transition for me to do. But Travis Etienne injured in this game, suffered a foot injury in the first quarter and didn't come back in the game. Jermichael Hasty took over for the remainder of the game and saw some work, became fantasy relevant, 12 carries, 28 yards. 5 receptions, 67 yards, and a touchdown. This isn't me asking so much about Jermichael Hasty so much as it is me asking about Darrell Henderson, the new running back that they signed off waivers coming off of the Rams, cut from them. If ETN is out, do you see what do you see Darrell Henderson's value being? Do you think that he kind of can bring some type of value to the fantasy world?
First of all, I don't think he gets the next shot. I think it's Jermichael Hasty.
You think? Oh, okay.
I do, but I don't think either one is relevant. Okay. I've always kind of been this way. You're going to have a guy that's going to get opportunities. So relevant, yeah. Should he be on rosters? Sure. Should he be in starting lineups? I don't think so. You saw it yesterday, 12 for 28. Like, that's not special. He did, even though he caught the touchdown pass there. He almost had another one. Could there be opportunities there for him? Sure, but I don't think it can trust him going forward. They're not Travis Etienne. Etienne is a special talent, which allows him to be special. I don't think these guys are Travis Etienne. I think these are guys you pick up, you hope for the best. If you do have to play them, you cross your fingers and hope they fall into the end zone or something like that. I don't think they would be very relevant. I have serious concerns now about Travis Etienne because I don't know much about this injury, except is it the same foot or not?
I don't think it was. I think it was the same foot, but I've heard reports that it's not as serious. He came out after the game and said he should be fine for week 13. But the lingering.
Yeah, so was Leonard Fournette, and he.
Yeah, well, his quote was, "We'll be straight for next week." I don't know. I don't.
Yeah, I just worry if that's the same foot that he had the Liz Frank injury on. I would have some concern there. But I'm not excited about the Jaguars backfield without ETN. Henderson, Hasty, throw another H in there, triple H you could put in there. I don't care. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, that's that. I'm going to step in here now and take over for you to talk about someone who stood out to me, and really it's me getting your thoughts on this player. It was Brian Robinson. Had a great day yesterday for the Washington Commanders. Found the end zone, but in the receiving game, he had 20 and a half fantasy points, 18 carries, 105 yards on the ground, and then obviously the 3 receptions for 20 yards and a receiving touchdown here. He looked great. It was a great matchup for him against the Atlanta Falcons, who have not been good against the opposing fantasy running backs. We talked about it at the beginning of the show yesterday that this was possible, that this could have happened for either Antonio Gibson or for a Brian Robinson, and it ended up being the Brian Robinson day. I think that Brian Robinson is going to be a guy moving forward. I know you said it all the time, but I think moving forward, Brian Robinson's going to be a player that you're going to be having a great time starting in your lineup, especially towards the fantasy playoffs. He's got a great fantasy playoff schedule when it comes to those week 15, 16, and 17. He's got the Giants. Oh, maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. He's got the Browns in week 17 and the Niners in week 16. So maybe that week 16 is your problem there. But 2 of the 3 games, the Giants and the Browns, those 2 weeks, I think those are better weeks. I guess maybe I just answered my own question. Maybe I was trying to click on it before my mouth could get to it, and I didn't get to it in time.
It's not. I don't think it's it's not a terrible take. I think you're still going to run into the same situation that we have with guys like this. Is Brian Robinson's touchdown dependent? His ceiling without a touchdown is 12 points. I mean, that game, 18 for 105 and 2 catches, 20 or maybe 14. Like that's a good game. Like I'm not knocking that game, but that's a ceiling without scoring a touchdown. Because I don't anticipate the passing game work like he got yesterday. First of all, the swing pass that he scored on, shout out to him because he ran dude over. Like he just willed his way into the end zone.
Well, he's a good back. He's a good back.
Context matters. Context matters when we're talking about fantasy. So yeah, I watched the play. I still think there's not a lot of explosion there. I did think they took advantage of a poor run defense. But he does look to be getting more explosive. It's something that I thought that Najee Harris needed to do, that it took him, it's taken him really long to do. Brian Robinson does feel like over the past couple of weeks, he's looking more explosive. But again, I do take into consideration it's been Philly, it's been Houston, and now it's been Atlanta. And we've seen what those three teams have done against the run, especially over the past month. So I'm not saying that he can't do it, but that his ceilings against the poorest run defenses have been 14 points, 5 points, and 20 yesterday with the big game there. I worry about players like that, to get excited about them, because those are the guys that get you 4 points in the playoff game.
I think the reason why I would be excited, and I'm going to lock this in now that I've actually looked into it a little bit more. So he's got the Giants in week 15. In week 16, he's got the Niners, and then in week 17, he's got the Browns. That Niners game, obviously, the Niners are the best against the running back position in terms of fantasy. But the Browns 31st and the Giants 24th. And where did you draft Brian Robinson, Aaron? You probably drafted Brian Robinson at the point where, okay, he's a flex option for you. You didn't invest in Brian Robinson. If anything, I'm not even sure he was drafted in some leagues. So you look at him and you say, okay, you didn't invest that much. You probably still have other backs that you can play ahead of him in that matchup in week 16 against the Niners. I think Brian Robinson's going to be a great fantasy option for you in the playoffs, minus that week 15, because of where you drafted him.
That's the point, though. You drafted other players. So you have guys that you felt better about, that are probably better than Brian Robinson, and you're going to trust Brian Robinson instead? And I agree. The matchups are good for when you look at the Giants and the Browns. I think it's a great matchup. The Giants, I would be concerned about the Giants because it's not always on the ground. Remember, running back's fantasy value has to come through the air. That includes those pass-catching backs. You look at some of those games, the Giants are giving up to Dallas. It's not always Zeke on the ground. Tony Pollard was killing the Giants out of the backfield. Is Brian Robinson going to be that in the playoffs? There's still Antonio Gibson there, and he's still going to be the number one target out of the backfield. I'm not saying you can't start him. What I'm saying is, because of your point, because you make a good point about you didn't heavily invest in him, you didn't draft him high, you probably have other backs that are better that you're not benching Brian Robinson for. Like you're not benching those players for Brian Robinson. If I'm the one who's making that decision, if you trust it, understand that if Brian Robinson doesn't score a touchdown, you're not getting a big game. You're getting a max ceiling game of like 10 to 12 points. And for me, we've talked about this before. I want a guy who has the highest ceiling with the highest floor. Brian Robinson's floor is 4 points. He can go 15 carries, 40 yards, and you're like, man, what did I do? And you're upset. So I get it. I'm not saying Brian Robinson's not a bad play. Matter of fact, I have Brian Robinson in the league in this exact situation. He's my flex guy, but I also have some other guys that Zay Jones. You starting Zay Jones or Brian Robinson in the playoffs?
It depends. I would start Brian Robinson over Zay Jones against the Giants and the Browns over Zay Jones.
Over Zay Jones playing whoever he's playing.
Zay Jones has Dallas that first week, and then
I would go the other way
because he wouldn't be matched up with Trayvon Diggs, and you think that
number one, they're going to have to throw the ball a ton. They're going to have to throw the ball. I actually like the matchup. Dallas gives up yards. They just don't give up scores, right? It's Trayvon Diggs, but they give up stuff in the passing game. I would start Zay Jones. Like right now, I think the ceiling is much higher for Zay Jones than it is for Brian Robinson. And that is my concern with Brian Robinson. It's not that I don't think you can start him. I just think that there's going to always be somebody else I like more.
I would start Brian Robinson over Zay Jones. And I was about to ask you a start question for you, but I think I already know where you're going to go because you make fun of me. But I'm going to do it anyways because this is what I do. In week 15, Brian Robinson has the Giants. In week 15, Ken Walker has San Francisco.
That's an asinine question.
Okay.
I mean, you knew I was going to tell you that, right? I don't believe in that theory. If you bench your studs because of a matchup, you are asking to lose fantasy leagues. That's all I'm going to say. Does it mean they're 100% foolproof? No. Christian McCaffrey didn't have a great day yesterday against the Saints, right? And that was a bad matchup technically. But if you bench Christian McCaffrey or you bench Ken Walker, a top 7-8 running back, you are asking to lose your fantasy leagues. That's all. Again, it might pan out for you, and then you could be known as the guy that did it. Yeah, I was right, but more times than not, I'm not going for that.
I don't know. I think I know. I wouldn't have the balls to do it, but I think I would strongly consider Brian Robinson over Ken Walker against the Niners in that because that's huge. That's your first week. You're putting it all on the table right there. I think that's
Ken Walker. A bad game for Ken Walker was yesterday. Think about it. And the week before. Think about it. Where'd he finish?
Yeah.
That's the ceiling for Brian Robinson. That's really what it's about. Ken Walker is too involved. Ken Walker gets involved in the pass game. Brian Robinson, again, people make that move all the time. And sometimes it pans out and sometimes it doesn't. We ultimately don't know until it happens. I am a believer. If you make a move, if you choose in the fantasy playoffs to start Brian Robinson against the Giants over Ken Walker against the Niners, you are asking to lose your fantasy league. Good luck.
I think it's you being too cute. I think that's what it comes down to is like if you start Brian Robinson over those guys, it's being too cute. But we gotta get rolling here. We gotta move on. We've got a lot. We've got a few more. We might not hit on everything. We might have to pick some of this stuff up tomorrow before our waiver show. But we're gonna keep rolling here. We got to talk about Garrett Wilson before we move on from our standouts because that deserves to be talked about. And I'm really dying to know your thoughts on Garrett Wilson rest of the season. Yesterday, the return of Mike White, I should say, and Garrett Wilson stepping up, having a big day, 26 fantasy points for him, 5 receptions, 95 yards, 2 touchdowns. Won me some money because I did bet anytime touchdown on Garrett Wilson because I do think the value for him is just skyrockets with an actual quarterback back there. He not only had one, he had two, 8 targets, wide receiver 5 currently on the week. Aaron, let's talk about both the game itself and rest of season value with Mike White moving forward. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm upset. I'm a little upset. I shouldn't have included Garrett Wilson in my trade. I knew I shouldn't have with you because I knew what could happen if he got a quarterback that's just willing to throw the football. That's really what it is. Zach Wilson just wasn't willing to throw the football. He was very tentative back there. It doesn't matter whether it's Joe Flacco, whether it's Mike White, whether it's anybody that's willing to let Garrett Wilson go make a play and decisive with the football he's going to be a standout. Garrett Wilson proved it earlier this year when he had Joe Flacco under center, and then his numbers dipped when Zach Wilson came back. He had a nice couple of games there against New England and Buffalo, and you could see it. The talent level is off the charts for Garrett Wilson. The route running, his ability, his body control, his hands, his ability to know how to read man versus zone. Garrett Wilson is a fantasy problem going forward. He is going to be a fantasy option as we move forward, especially in Dynasty. If you drafted him, congratulations. All they need to make sure is they have a quarterback that's willing to throw him the football. Yep. We saw it again yesterday. 5 catches, 95 yards, the 2 tutties. They were early, and then Elijah Moore got involved. You even saw more out of him. So this Jets passing game looked different, and I get it. They were playing the Chicago Bears. It was a great matchup, but it wasn't really about who they were playing. It was just about the comfort level of a guy who was playing like, hey, man, this is my opportunity to play football. I'm going to throw the ball. And Zach Wilson plays kind of scared. He played like he didn't want to turn the football over. And when you play like that, guess what happens? You turn the football over, you're inaccurate. And we saw that yesterday. Garrett Wilson going forward, to me, is jam-packed right there in the wide receiver 2 conversation. Could say middle to back end of wide receiver 2 conversation. And if they can get more out of the quarterback position, then he could be something even more than that. Pretty good matchups when we talk about late in the season, too. Detroit, Jacksonville, Seattle, good matchups there. The only thing I'm concerned about is if Michael Carter's healthy or if the Jets are playing that type of football in bad weather. Does he get game scripted out sometimes, or is it more run-heavy games? Some of those teams are run-heavy. You talk about Detroit running the football a lot. The Jets want to run the football to start. But I think overall, you're getting a solid wide receiver 2 for the rest of the season, and I think you're happy with that.
Yeah, I am very happy because you did just trade him to me. And that was one of the big things that I was thinking about when looking at Garrett Wilson's value rest of season. The matchups are juicy. Like you said, he's got Jacksonville, he's got Seattle, he's got Detroit. That Detroit one, very, very juicy for the wide receiver position. And I think that it's going to be huge. He could be, when I look at Garrett Wilson, I think league winner. Like, I think he's that player that during the season, he was not like that relevant.
He's a wide receiver 2.
Yeah, I think he's a wide receiver 2 rest of season, especially in those playoff matchups. You start him with confidence. The Jaguars allowing the 24th most points to the wide receiver position. The Lions 30th. And then who do we say? The Jaguars, the Lions, and the Seahawks. Jaguars, Lions, and the Seahawks. The Seahawks are the only concern that you have there. They're allowing the 6th. They're the 6th best against wide receiver position. But like you said, I don't think it matters. I think Garrett Wilson's going to be that guy. I think he's going to be the number 1 option for New York. Does it change at all if Joe Flacco ends up stepping in? I know Mike White had a great game, but like you said, it was against Chicago.
Yeah, I do want people to pump the brakes on the Mike White train. He did this last year. Okay, remember, he's going to end up going and playing a team next week like Minnesota, and I know they're not great, but it's a much better football team on the road at Minnesota, on the road at Buffalo. We could very well see 2 poor performances from Mike White. I'm not all aboard the Mike White train at all, but I do think there is something to be said about giving a guy opportunities, and Mike White seems to not play scared. So, yeah, he might turn the football over, but he's not going to play scared. And when Joe Flacco comes in, I know Joe Flacco's not playing scared. He's a veteran in this league, won a Super Bowl. So he's going to throw the ball. I think as long as Zach Wilson's not back on the field, that Garrett Wilson's value maintains. And to be honest, I think it could maintain with Zach Wilson if his head is right. I just think that right now his head's not right. So I think if you're the Jets, you have no choice at this point to ride the rest of the season out with what they have as the backup quarterbacks and try to get into the playoffs and make a run. And then you come back next year, you have Zach Wilson work in the offseason, and Zach Wilson's back under center next year. So I do believe Robert Saleh when he says he's not moving on from him, that this is just a kind of a reset. But I think as long as they're winning and as long as they're in contention, then there's no reason to go back to Zach Wilson if you can do that with Mike White or Joe Flacco. And I think both make Garrett Wilson a wide receiver 2 going forward.
All right. Let's talk about the bad. Let's talk about those players that let you down this week. Let's talk about some bad ones. Alvin Kamara, 7 points this week. Mike Evans, 5 points. Damian Pierce, just 4 points. Tough weeks for those guys. You put Michael Carter in here. I'm not talking about Michael Carter having a bad week. He got hurt. I don't know why you put him in here. That doesn't make any sense.
It was a bad week. Like it
got hurt. Putting Travis in this.
Listen, when you announce James Robinson not playing due to coach's decision, not injured, you get really excited for a guy like Michael Carter. And then especially in a juicy matchup against the Bears. So what do you go and do? And I'll be honest, I'm emotional here. I'm going to pull a Vinny. So what do I go and do? I go into my lineups and I own Michael Carter because I play in a lot of dynasty leagues in a ton of leagues. And what do? Pull out running backs, put in Michael Carter. I put Michael Carter in about 9 lineups. Yeah. And you know what happens? He gets hurt. So I'm pissed off. So yes, I can put Michael Carter on a poor performance because it's not like he was good when he was on the field. It was just 6 carries for 20 yards. It wasn't like he was doing anything, 3 point whatever yards per carry. So I get to be emotional every now and then. And so Michael Carter burned me in a number of leagues. So guess what? He's a poor performer. And then now going forward, we had to deal with Ty Johnson and who else was in the backfield? I forget his name, some new guy. And now James Robinson's probably going to start next week. And he's probably going to burn me too because I'm going to put him back in the lineup and he's probably going to get hurt. The hell with Michael Carter. Matter of fact, everybody that wants Michael Carter, he's available for trade. He's available for trade on all my leagues.
Zonovan Knight is the gentleman that you're referring to.
They call him Bam Knight, right? His nickname Bam.
I guess, yeah. I think.
Yeah, Bam Bam. Hey, Bam Bigelow. Don't pick up Bam Bam, okay? He's not a thing.
No, and don't go pick up Ty Johnson, please. For the love of Jesus Christ.
No, we've been through that train. I'm sure it'll be James Robinson again next week. That's probably what it'll be. I don't know that Bam Bam Bigelow.
And I understand. Hey, the beast from the East. Oh man, Bam Bam Bigelow is the GOAT. But
I know we got to move on. But what does this say about James Robinson, though? Because remember to my point earlier this year,
he's hurt.
But
I think he's hurt.
But I said that, but they just said coach's decision. You can't just announce coach's decision in the NFL. If he has an injury, they have to disclose it. And this was my concern though when they just traded him out of Jacksonville.
I have a little bit more information to help you here. Robert Saleh said after said Bam Knight was active over James Robinson because of his style of running. He felt like they've left a lot of meat on the bone in the running game lately.
So again, what does that say about James Robinson? All the people that love James Robinson, myself included, but this is what happens. But what did I say? Didn't I say Philip Lindsay? It's exactly what I thought James Robinson was when this all started to go down. You have a couple of good years. You're undrafted. You have a chip on your shoulder. You're running hard for a team that's not good. You put up some production, and everybody falls in love with you, and then you become this journeyman all of a sudden. And I think we're at that point with James Robinson. I think he's going to be a guy. He's not getting a contract. And I told you guys that a couple of weeks ago. I said nobody's signing James Robinson next year to a big deal. He was never going to get signed to a big deal. And I think he knew that. The fall from grace happens quickly in the NFL, and he's more Philip Lindsay than he was a star running back. And I know you Jaguars fans love him so much.
Hey, this is why you draft, and everyone loses their mind about Travis Etienne. It's about drafting Travis, and I get that pick was bad because it was a running back first round, this and that, but there's all these underlying signs of James Robinson actually not being it. Real quick, this was Robert Saleh's comments on James Robinson.
What was the decision, Robert, to have Bam active versus James Robinson?
Bam's been doing a really nice job, and just from a style of running I think everyone saw just one cut, get vertical. Felt like over the past few weeks there's been a lot of meat on the bone in the run game, and we felt like if we could just get vertical and get rolling. With James, he's still learning our system. There's still things that he's getting comfortable with, so no one has seen the last of him. But just thought this would be an opportunity just to get a change of pace with Bam, who gets vertical pretty quick.
Brees Hall. They're missing Brees Hall.
He said, no one, we have not seen the last of James Robinson. Do you think we've seen the last of James Robinson?
No, like I said, he'll probably be active next week. He'll probably be the lead back next week. But there was a message in there that really what he was saying, it wasn't about Bam Knight. It wasn't about James Robinson. It was about Brees Hall. Brees Hall is exactly what he described. One cut and get upfield. You saw it all year long on those big, long runs. That is Brees Hall. They missed that, and he recognizes that. That, to me, that whole press conference wasn't even about James Robinson or Bam Knight. It was about him saying, damn, we miss our running back in Brees Hall. Brees Hall is that dude.
Dynasty managers, go trade the world for Brees Hall. Go trade the world.
That is the dude. That's exactly what Brees Hall is built on right there. One cut, foot in the ground, and I'm going to go take it to the house. And they don't have that. And James Robinson isn't that, but neither is Bam Knight. Let's be honest. Bam Bam Bigelow is not running like that either.
Hey, let's settle. Hey, if he does, I'm changing my name to Wham Bam Knight on my team, or so. I'm gonna have a Bam Bam Bigelow team name for the. It's time to. That's it. We've done it. Thank you. We've done it. I can finally change my team from Funk and Otis to something that has to do with Bam Knight. Oh, this is great.
Wham Bam Knight.
Oh man. All right. Cool. Great. This is fantastic. Disappointers though. Alvin Kamara 7 points. Mike Evans 5 points. Dameon Pierce 4 points. Is there any one that you want to talk about specifically there that deserves to be? Where's the concern level for those guys? Like, who's the most concerning out of those guys?
I'll be honest. I'm not concerned about Mike Evans at all. Saw 9 targets. Just a bad game. This is what Mike Evans does sometimes. Yeah. Dameon Pierce, not really too concerned about him. I still think he's an RB2. Just the volume wasn't there. Yeah, I do have some concerns with Alvin Kamara. Number one, I don't think he's healthy. That's the first. But you have to be concerned with also where New Orleans is at right now. I don't want to, like, this is not a shot at you for making the trade, because I've been all aboard Alvin Kamara. I worry that towards the end of the season they shut him down. I really do. I have serious concerns that, what are they, 4-8?
Yeah.
That if they lose another game, that maybe even next week he doesn't play. I honestly believe something is wrong with him and he just won't say anything. His volume's down, his production is down, and I know it was the 49ers, but I watched that game and he's fumbling and something's just not right with him. Maybe it's a mental thing. Maybe it's the things going on off the field. I don't know. But I looked at it and I was like, damn, I was wrong. Like, the Alvin Kamara thing might not be it. And I have him in a number of leagues. I have serious concerns about where he's at, and I don't have an explanation for it. I don't know if there's anything wrong. I don't know what the deal is there. But if I had to give us, out of those players, if I had to scale which one I felt I was most concerned about, it would be him. Still got involved in the pass game, but it doesn't feel like Alvin Kamara. And he's still RB 15 on the year. But immediately after that game, they listed him up as questionable. And I know he was still dealing with that hamstring injury, but he was playing and he looked fine. And something isn't right. That's all I can say. Something's not right. And it doesn't get much easier for them until after they have a bye week coming up. But then after the bye, he has 3 really good matchups.
And that's why I hope for him.
Again, but you just got to hope that he's around at that time and New Orleans isn't doing what they've been doing all year, which is kind of periodically using him, not really using him the right way. A lot of this is on Dennis Allen, but something's definitely not right with Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, no, I agree that I have started to sound the alarms on my Alvin Kamara stock that I have. And then I ended up going out and trading I ended up going out and trading for him in a lot of leagues as well. And it's really starting to definitely get a little concerning for Alvin Kamara. We're gonna now move on to the Monday Night Football game. We'll kind of cap off Week 12 tomorrow when we recap Monday Night Football and the fantasy impacts from those guys, as well as giving you our waivers and guys to go out and get for Week 13. We'll do all that tomorrow live at 9 a.m. Eastern time right here on our YouTube page. Aaron, now let's get into our primetime plays.
Yeah.
It is now time for our prime time plays for Monday Night Football here. Aaron, I'm going to actually start this off a little different here. We're changing things up a little bit. Our prime time plays are going deeper, are going more in depth. And we're not just talking DFS during our prime time plays. I'm gambling. I'm starting to become a degenerate gambler. I'm getting into bad habits. I'm starting to waste my money on parlays. I'm starting to waste my money daily. So I'm probably going to be wasting my money today and tonight on this game here. So I'm going to rattle off just a few bets, a little plus money here in this game. And I want to see if you like it, don't like it, and see your thoughts on it. Just the plus money matchups here. Anytime touchdown score, Najee Harris, plus 115.
Oh, you're just asking me if I like that? Just that? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Actually, so let's actually make a game out of this. This is gonna be the new segment. We're on the fly, hot changing here. We're rolling here, and this is gonna be the new segment. I'm going to give you a wager. I'm gonna give you a bet, an odds, and you give me on a scale of 1 to 10 the confidence of it hitting. Okay, is that okay? You think that'll work?
Sure.
Great. Najee Harris plus 115 anytime touchdown score.
No.
Just zero. Just zero. Zero confidence.
I'm going. What are we going? 1 through what? Like 1 through
10.
1 through 10. I will take a 3. Colts are not allowing very many. Colts aren't allowing very many touchdowns to the running back position. Only a half a touchdown per game. Najee Harris only has 2 rushing touchdowns on the year. And then you throw in the passing game. They're not really giving up anything in the passing game to receiving either, less than that. So and he has 2 of those on the year. So I will say about a 3.
Let's talk about the passing game and maybe talk about a tight end, Pat Freiermuth, plus 270 anytime touchdown.
Yeah, I hate bets like this, Vinny. Anytime touchdown, cool. Sure, I'll give you a 7. He's more likely to score than Najee Harris, but touchdowns are so up in the air, man.
Okay.
I feel much better when you talk about yardage or receptions.
Well, that's the only real plus money I'm seeing in terms of like these position players here. Pat Freiermuth under 44.5 yards, is that plus 110?
Under 44.5 yards? Ugh.
Under 44.
I would take the over on that. I think Freiermuth has a nice day here.
Yeah, there's a lot of plus, there's a lot of minus, there's a lot of bets with it. Under 3.5 receptions for George Pickens. You think he gets more than 3.5, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Najee Harris under 2.5 receptions.
That's an interesting one.
That's plus 125.
That's an interesting one, but he hasn't had less than 3 well, I guess he's had less than 3 twice in the past 5 weeks. I don't like that one either.
So really, there's no bets to be made here tonight.
Not back off any money.
Back off any plus money bets here on your books here. The Steelers are plus 130 on the money line to win this game.
I love that.
Really,
I would take Pittsburgh on the money line tonight.
And they're getting 2.5 points on the spread. So.
Yeah, I'm outright money line Pittsburgh Steelers tonight for me.
Wow. Okay. All right. So bet your Steelers. Let's get into our primetime plays for DFS. Let's talk about who's available here. Let's try and win people some money. Let's try and set the perfect lineup here. Jonathan Taylor, obviously the most expensive player heading into tonight. Michael Pittman, Kenny Pickett, Matt Ryan, Najee Harris round out your top 5 most expensive players on DFS tonight. Aaron, what's your lineup looking like?
Yeah, I have interesting here, but I'm going Paris Campbell as my captain. I want a cheaper captain, but I do think Pittsburgh's pass defense is poor. And we talked a lot about Michael Pittman. I think a lot of people are going to go that route, but I think I can see Paris Campbell having, 8 catches and have a nice day. So I have him as my captain, trying to capitalize there. Only 10,200 for a captain spot, as opposed to putting Jonathan Taylor up there, who's like 17 grand. I do have Pat Freiermuth in my lineup at 6,400. I think that's a steal. I think he has a nice day. Him and Kenny Pickett have produced pretty well together. He's averaging 10.9 fantasy points on DK, but I think today he exceeds that number. The real big debate here is whether I'm putting Kenny Pickett in my lineup or not. I really like the idea of putting Kenny Pickett in my lineup tonight. I just don't know if I want to.
Yeah. I have, as of right now, I have the Muth as my captain. Pittman, Pickens. I got the 3 Ps: Pittman, Pickens, and Paris in my lineup. I don't know if I want Matt Ryan. I think I'm going to choose Kenny Pickett over Matt Ryan here. Although, if I love these wide receivers so much, why would I not love Matt Ryan?
Yeah,
is that a thought?
Well,
Is that
PPR league? You got to remember, like Michael Pittman could go 10 catches, 120 yards, and think about that. That's a 22-point day, right? Even if he doesn't score a touchdown. So
yeah, I love Michael Pittman in this game. I do love Michael Pittman, but you're right on the idea of people are going to be that he's going to be a popular pick.
Yeah, I think I'm going Pittsburgh Steelers defense. Michael Pittman's not going to be in my lineup, and I can't believe I'm saying that.
Yeah, I can't believe you're saying that either.
It's going to be tough, but he's not going to be in my lineup. I'm going for the gusto. I'm going for
the gusto. This man said the gusto.
I'm going for the gusto.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going Steelers heavy here. I'm going Paris Campbell to have as my captain, but no, that doesn't even make sense to do that. Let me do it this way. I'm going George Pickens as my captain.
Great, because I wanted to go Paris Campbell as my captain, so this is great.
That's okay. I'm joining George Pickens as my captain. Paris Campbell's in my lineup. Pat Freiermuth, Najee Harris, Kenny Pickett, and Steelers defense. Heavy Steelers and Paris Campbell in my lineup.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have my lineup here set as well. Paris Campbell is my captain. Pat Freiermuth, George Pickens, Kenny Baby Hands Pickett, Michael Pittman Jr., and the Colts defense. I think Kenny Pickett can be prone to some turnovers. Maybe you get a few interceptions from Kenny Pickett in this game. Yep. Update entry. Everything is set. Boom.
No Jonathan Taylor in either one of them.
In either one of our lineups. I like the Steelers. I do like the Steelers defense, to be completely honest. I think the addition of TJ Watt, everyone just gets better. Everyone's attributes just get +1 from TJ Watt being back up in the lineup here. Let's talk specifically about DFS though before we wrap this show up. Let's talk specifically about some of the players that you just chose. Who's your fit? Who's a player you're avoiding in tonight's? Let's start with there then. Who's a player you're avoiding tonight in DFS?
I think I just mentioned him. I think it's Jonathan Taylor, and it's not. I just think at the price point, I worry if they don't get into the end zone, what kind of impact he's actually going to have. And this is not. I get it. It's Jonathan Taylor. He's averaging the most fantasy points per game, or points per touch. He's one of the leaders in fantasy football, despite his lackluster non-RB1 performance that we've seen this year. But in a Monday Night Football game, I feel like this is kind of where the Pittsburgh Steelers shine. I know we talked a lot about the Steelers and TJ Watt and being there, but also the Minkah Fitzpatrick, that running game. I think what you can exploit Pittsburgh is on the outside in that passing game. And I think the Colts understand that. And I do think they lean a little bit more on the passing game tonight than they do the running game. So not that Jonathan Taylor won't have a good day, but will he have a good enough day to return that value for a price point of a captain spot at 17,000 or, even one of your plays at a $12,000, $14,000, $15,000 mark. And I think that's kind of why I'm staying away. I think there's some better bargain plays that have nicer matchups and more opportunities there. I love Pat Freiermuth. To me, I'm going with guys like that, like Pat Freiermuth against that Colts defense and the connection that he has with Kenny Pickett. That's where I'm going to spend that money up. If I want to spend up somewhere, I'm going to spend up on Michael Pittman before I spend up on Jonathan Taylor today. So Jonathan Taylor is just one of those guys that he'll have a fine day. He's a good fantasy player. He's a good player, obviously. But I don't know that the return value from his price point is going to happen.
Yeah, I think I stand with that as well as a player to kind of avoid it. It is a very expensive number for Jonathan Taylor here, and I'm trying to take a look at it. In the past 3 games, the Pittsburgh Steelers defense has only allowed 1 rushing touchdown and that came from the Philadelphia Eagles, who we see how great they are. That came from Miles Sanders and the Philadelphia Eagles back at the end of October. So they haven't allowed a rushing touchdown. I know the rushing numbers when it comes to yardage has been good for the Pittsburgh Steelers defense to allow against the running back position in terms of fantasy numbers. They rank towards the bottom half of the NFL. But in DFS here, you're looking for guys to find the end zone. And they have not. They've only allowed one touchdown. I'm going back to see here. They've only allowed one touchdown in one rushing touchdown in 4 weeks, I should say. And I'm continuing to go back and still not seeing 5 weeks. They've only allowed one rushing touchdown. We're continuing this train here because this is either way, Jonathan Taylor, avoid. Who's a player that's a must-have in your lineup? Like, has to be in your lineup, lock, set, bing, bang, boom, in your lineup, must-have.
Yeah, I think I mentioned him. I think it's Pat Freiermuth. The price point is way too good to not have a guy that him and Kenny Pickett just have somewhat of a connection. It's only $6,400 to have him in your lineup. We saw last week he continued to excel in what he was doing. We've seen over the past 4 weeks he's had 35 targets in 4 weeks. And obviously there was a bye smashed in there, but 9, 7, 7, and 12 targets last week, 8 catches, 79 yards, 15 fantasy points from the tight end position. Pat Freiermuth is right now as good as they come outside of, the big guys and Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews. So he's automatic lock for me. I think the price point is nice, and I think you get another nice day from him.
Yeah, I think so too. That's a lock. The relationship between him and Kenny Pickett is a special one. I also want to throw out George Pickens in there as well. I think he's going to be a good matchup as well. I think
my captain.
Yeah, I think George Pickens is going to be a good matchup. I feel like you're going to see a lot of Stephon Gilmore and Deontay Johnson, which leaves a lot of room for George Pickens. And because you look at the way the Steelers are set up, the best receiver that we know on this team is Deontay Johnson. You put your best cornerback on him, which then leaves it open for George Pickens, who actually might be the best receiver on this team. I think he was, like I said before, I've been harping on George Pickens since the draft, saying he was going to be the best receiver from this draft class. I know Garrett Wilson had that big day, but the relationship between Kenny Pickett and George Pickens, it's special, and I think we're going to see it again tonight. If I were to give a lock, it's going to be make sure George Pickens is in your lineup. You have him as your captain. I couldn't put him there, but George Pickens is a must-have in your DFS lineups tonight. That does it, though, for our Week 12 fantasy recap. We'll finish everything off tomorrow when we take a look back at the Indianapolis Colts Pittsburgh Steelers Monday Night Football game and give you our where we were right, where we were wrong, and look ahead towards the Week 13 fantasy waiver wire. Aaron, any last words before we close out our first full-length fantasy show?
My dog, show my dog. Hey, if there was ever any doubt, episode 124, episode 1 of the new fantasy era, Josh Jacobs is an absolute dog. Listen up, everybody. Pay attention. Pay that man. All that talk on the offseason. And the dog says, he's home. That's in his chest. Literally, guys, everybody listen. This is a literal x-ray of Josh Jacobs' chest. Now, yeah. I don't know why there's such a little wimpy little dog in there.
That's the first one I could find.
There should be a pit bull in that mug because that boy is a dog. And we didn't mention this, and I do think this is important to mention. Josh Jacobs was questionable to play late in the week with a calf injury. And this is why I always said he was one of my favorite options because he plays football. He's hurt, he plays. He's sick, he plays. It's very similar to the way I feel about Zeke. And it's why I always will defend him is because these dudes do not miss games. And I'm not saying he's never missed a game, but they don't just, I got an ankle injury, I'm out. I twisted my pinky, I'm out. Dogs. That's what I want on my team. I want dogs. So Josh Jacobs, next year, you coming home. I'll make sure I got you in every league.
I got you though, Josh Jacobs, in every league. So
You're welcome.
I appreciate you doing what you do. That does it though for another episode of the Sac City Podcast. Again, we'll be back again live tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern Time. New start time for the Sac City Podcast. It's new start time, new era for the city. Don't miss out. Be there 9 a.m. tomorrow live, YouTube at the Sac City Pod. For my best friend, Aaron Mukes, I am me. We'll see you tomorrow.
Peace out.